Welcome to another edition of the Commitment Issues Podcast. I'm Woody Womack, recording from Atlanta, Georgia, joined by Miami's finest, Rob Cassidy. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm recording this from the inside of a hotel room, actually, because my townhome, the neighbors have termites, and they've put a tent over my house, and so I am sitting in a Marriott in Miami.
Boy, as if we don't spend enough time in hotels already. But you're getting some bonus points anyway, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I've used some of mine, but, I've used up on one night, and then I'm collecting points on the next night. But you have a way of looking at the bright side of things, don't you, man?
Yeah, exactly. Well, especially when it comes to free stuff. So now let's get into some talk about one of the biggest topics, I guess, in the college football world this week. Michigan down at IMG, a place that you and I frequent during the offseason, you, of course, during the season as well. You had a chance to catch up with some prospects and talk about it, and I guess kind of give us an overview of why you think Michigan made the decision to come down there and hold spring practice.
Well, I think at least partially, these practices aren't being held in a vacuum, and I think people need to realize that. I mean, this isn't necessarily going to result in Michigan getting every kid they want from Florida, but it's part of a larger approach that I think they've taken to put extra emphasis on the state and on the players from the state. I had a chance to talk to some players. I had a chance to talk to Michigan's compliance director. I talked to a lot of people writing the story, which will be on Rivals.com now, the day that you're listening to this. I filed it just today. But as soon as this podcast reaches people, it'll be on the front page of the site. There are stringent rules in place for this thing. There's allowed to be no contact between IMG players or high school players of any kind and the Michigan staff. Only one of these practices of the four that they're holding this week is actually open, and that's Friday's practice. But even then, they're not allowed to talk to players. There is no bump rule even. They can't even say hello if they pass them on campus. So that's out of play as well. So it's really become... I think what people think, it's been sensationalized a little bit in the media where people think that, here's this no-holds-barred assault that Michigan's going to have on Florida talent, when it's really not. I don't even know that many kids from outside of IMG that are planning on attending Friday's practice. There's really no reason for them to. But I think it does help Michigan in the way that it is part of that larger strategy. They've gone out and done such good work in Florida. They've hired a state championship winning football coach in Devin Bush Jr. now or Devin Bush Sr. to be a defensive analyst. So when you view it as one thing, I'm not sure it's going to have a large effect on Michigan recruiting. But when you view it in the bigger picture, I think that's when you can really kind of see there might be fruits to this labor.
Yeah, it was interesting that they have those rules in place because I believe when prospects visit campuses for spring practices, they can interact. So I guess just because this is at a remote location, that's why they have that rule in place? Yeah,
I talked to the Michigan compliance director, said that because it's a quiet period, there's allowed to be no on-campus contact. So right now, you can't go to a school's campus and talk to a student-athlete there. And that's kind of what's in play here at IMG. I think that if it was on Michigan's campus, they'd be able to have contact. But since the practices are on IMG's campus, contact is outlawed.
Very interesting. So, yeah, like you said, the prospects at IMG are from all over the country. This is a school where kids come to basically, kind of get that college experience before they go to college. It's basically football around the clock. So, I'm sure are they staying on site? They have dorms there at IMG. I'd imagine that's where they're staying, right? Yeah,
I believe that they're staying there in the, what do they call them, villas at IMG. But most of those practices are closed off. People there say there's very little Michigan signage. If you didn't know that Michigan was practicing there, you could pull in the parking lot and never know. It's not like they have big banners up and the end zones are painted.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting, the whole event. It's just another notch in the old Jim Harbaugh publicity tour or whatever. We've seen him do all kinds of crazy stuff. I think you and I are kind of a fan of it, especially if it makes people mad. I just wonder, what are the results we're going to see? Does it end up putting more pressure on the team to have success on the field because he's kind of, making himself such a big personality?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's definitely some subset of reporters and certainly fans that are hoping for him to fail so they can jump all over him. That's certainly happening, right? That's just how the world works, how the media works, how fans work, opposing fans work. Is the louder you are about something, the louder they'll become if you fail.
So we were I was just down in Florida. We did the old double dip. between the Orlando and Miami Rivals Camp Series events. But, it's the start of camp season. It's in full swing. I mean, every weekend we're having a camp event. There are other companies are having events as well. So I guess we should kind of introduce people to what camp season is and what goes on. I mean, they're called camps even though they don't take place overnight. There's no sleeping bags involved or anything like that. And basically, we bring in, especially at the Rivals Camp Series, which is presented by Under Armour, we bring in, 180 kids from whatever city or whatever region we're in and kind of just let them compete. I mean, we have, former NFL coaches, former college coaches out there running the camp, putting the players through all kinds of drills, and then there's a competition period where they go one-on-one. So, Rob, what's kind of been your take? I know you and I both really weren't familiar with this at all before we got into the biz. So, what's been your take on these events kind of now that we've been in it for a while?
Well, and they differ. Camps like, ours, the Rivals Camp Series, and even, the Nike Opening Regionals, to be real honest, I don't know if I'll get my hand slapped for promoting them, are camps that are kind of, beneficial for everybody, I think. The people that get to cover them get a good look at these prospects going up against other elite prospects. Nobody's being charged. It's all free for the athlete, and the athletes get A, free gear, and B, a chance to get coached by some pretty good coaches that have coached on the college level and at the NFL level in most cases. So it seems to benefit everybody. It's not like one group exploiting the other group by any means here. I've got my own theory on camps that charge players to participate, depending on where they are. But these two are not like that, and I think they're probably the two most beneficial. And I assume you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of camps that charge, and like I said, I'm not a big fan of that either. Some of them, charge a small amount to offset the cost of the facilities and things like that if they don't have sponsorships. But, I often tell players, if you have multiple offers already, there's definitely no reason you should ever pay to go to a camp. I mean, that shouldn't be in the cards. So, and there are camps that are pure, I guess we would call them money grabs. I mean, where you're talking about $75 a pop to go, and then they take as many kids as they want, 400, 500 kids. So, they promise exposure. They don't give out, and they don't give out rosters. So even if you do well and find a way to stand out, it's often hard to identify from a media standpoint or from an exposure standpoint. So it's interesting. It's something that people just kind of have to learn on the fly, because a lot of these parents and players are only in the recruiting window for a year or two from the time they maybe get invited to these events to the time when they're getting offers and making a college decision. So
yeah, it's like you pointed out, you and I had no idea before we got into covering recruiting, 5-6 years ago, that this was such a big deal. I had no idea that people covered these things even until I started covering them. So I can't imagine what it would be like as a parent to not know. I mean, you want to talk about somebody that's ripe to be exploited. Parents of recruits here. I mean, and I think that does unfortunately happen to them a little bit because they're not familiar with the process. They're not familiar with how things work, and they've got a million other people telling them, your kid can get into college if you give me $80, which is, terrible, but it's something that happens.
Yeah, it is a tough angle, and we get criticized sometimes when the rankings come out that you only rank guys high who go to your camps, and some kids can't afford it, and there's definitely circumstances where people have transportation issues and stuff like that. And obviously, we do our best to help everyone get there and kind of put them in locations to where people can get there. So the biggest thing is the camps are free. They're free to attend. And, a player's not going to get dropped in the rankings because he didn't come to an event. Now, is a player going to go up during the off-season who doesn't do any off-season events? Of course not, because what would have changed, regarding his status? There's no new film. And if he hasn't been to any events, how do you change his ranking?
It's particularly hard for big men, we should point out, because at least in our area, there's so much 7-on-7 that you see these guys at 7-on-7 events constantly. I mean, whether there's a tournament in Miami or Atlanta or Nashville or Knoxville, or you and I make our rounds and I probably see wide receivers, defensive backs, linebackers, running backs, and quarterbacks every weekend at something. But there is a shortage of events for linemen, and I think those are the guys that tend to go under the radar, at least in our region, because they're just not out there as often. You have to see them on film, and you have to see them on Friday nights, and at the very rare camp, like the Rivals Camp or the Nike Opening, where there are big men involved.
Yeah, so we went down. We were in Florida. We started in Orlando. We had a really good event there, and then we went we went down to Miami. So, I mean, I think you had a chance to do a lot more interviews than I did. I know I was pretty tied up, I guess would be the term to use. So, what was your feedback, I mean, in terms of maybe schools that are making an impact with these in-state Florida kids?
Well, you got the in-state schools, and they always seem to be in the mix, so, that doesn't really turn my head when they get mentioned. But with this class, anyway, it really seems like you've got your Clemsons, you've got your Tennessees, you've obviously got your Alabamas and your Auburns, you've got your Michigan now, and you've also got your Notre Dame, and those, I think, seemed like... and your Louisville. And those seemed like at least the most out-of-state schools that I heard the most from prospects, from elite prospects anyway, is that group seems to, at least early on with this class, have established something. And in the case of Michigan, this is new. I mean, the trajectory for Michigan and Florida is going the right direction, man. It just seems like it seems to compound on itself. So, we touch on what we touched on at the beginning of the podcast. You can hate Harbaugh for whatever, but I think, and I don't think it's things like having the event at IMG that's helping him. I think it's things like the reaction to having the event at IMG that's helping him. He is never not in the headlines down here. The fact that people get angry is what I think might be spurring this on, because Michigan is at the forefront of everybody's mind all of a sudden in SEC country constantly, not because they're having a practice where they can't talk to a recruit at IMG, but because everybody is on the internet and every other news outlet clamoring about how unfair it is that they're able to have an event at IMG.
Yeah, it is interesting, and there is always a lot of talk about these out-of-state schools, especially in the spring. It will be fun to watch kind of how that plays out, and if these schools actually do steal the guys that Florida State, and Miami don't want, because I
forgot to mention your Oklahomas of the world. They got mentioned a lot this weekend from Florida prospects. They've got commitment from Trajan Bandy, who's a rival 250 defensive back, and other guys are very high, including A.J. Davis, the Rivals 100 running back, and some other guys. I was really surprised by how often I heard Oklahoma come out of prospects' mouths.
Yeah, and Oklahoma has done a good job of stealing people out of the Northern California area. We've seen them, do a good job there. That's a long way from home, so maybe they can get into Miami too and say, hey, let's maybe start taking guys from South Florida.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like they're doing, and I don't really know what they're pitching as far as, I guess come to the Big 12 and compete for a championship every single year, which is what Oklahoma does there. But they're getting guys. They've always been able to get guys that maybe are limited on other in-state options or regional options or SEC options. But with a guy like Bandy and Davis, these are dudes that have the ability to go to a lot of successful places in the region, closer to their homes, and I think they're just doing such a good job recruiting them. I know that Bob Stoops has gotten more personally involved in recruiting. I know that he's kind of led the charge with A.J. Davis. I may have done the same thing with Bandy, and I think there's something to be said for when your school sends the head coach. I think that has a bigger wow factor, especially on out-of-region guys than some assistant.
So there's a big debate among people who follow our camps. Do these camps lead to offers? Coaches will say no, they don't. But then we'll write something and a kid will get 5 offers the next day. You have to wonder, what happened? You know what I mean? And I don't necessarily think coaches read what we write and immediately offer the kid, but I think it's like, okay, maybe they go watch the videos that we release from the event, which are available on our YouTube page at youtube.com/rivalsfeatures. I think they watch those and maybe they go watch the film, and that's when they make the offer decision. But were there some guys, I guess we should kind of talk about some surprises that we saw at the two camps, and guys we think that we mentioned in our top performer stories, which are on the website now, that are going to get more offers?
Yeah, and before we touch on that, I want to touch on something else, which you were talking about a second ago. I just find it funny, and it seems like once a camp series, at least in the camps I attend, there's always like a loophole that a coach has found. I don't think that I've ever gone a year without seeing a college coach at one of these events, because they'll either get their kid in somehow and then attend as a parent and sit in the stands with a notepad, and I won't name schools here, but once a year I've seen it, and I saw it in Orlando already on this camp series. I saw a college coach at one of these camps, and I'm not even sure, he may have had a kid in there, but I'm not positive he did. I didn't see it on the roster. I'm not going to name him.
He did have his son, actually, because I think his son might have made top performers. So I only knew it because I had the same name. So if you want to do some sleuthing, you can figure out which coach he was. But I actually bumped into him and talked to him for a little bit. The bump rule is in full effect between me and him. But yeah, his son was there, and like you said, the rule is if you have I believe you have a relative. I don't even know if it has to be a dependent. If you have a relative in the camp, you can come attend. So it's a big tool. I was joking with somebody the other day that I would, if I was a college coach, I would just adopt I'd adopt a kid every year and just run him through the camps when he graduated, and just adopt another one, and so on and so forth.
USC a few years ago, and I think I can say this now that the staff is gone. There was an assistant there that had a son that he put him in 4 camps in 4 different regional locations, and showed up at all of them. Like, well, I can be here because my kid's here. So the poor kid was basically being used as like a like a recruiting feeler. I mean, it was really amazing.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So I guess we should start with in terms of surprises. I think the kid who won the MVP at the Orlando camp, William Barnes, 2018 offensive lineman from Apopka, Florida, where he's following the footsteps of Martez Ivy, a 5-star, was a top 5 overall prospect, started for Florida as a true freshman this year. He was probably, I guess, would he be the biggest surprise of the weekend overall as well?
Yeah, I would assume. I mean, I didn't have any idea who that guy was when he showed up, and he showed up and completely dominated. I think in Miami, another one would have been Owen Carney, who just transferred from Miramar to Miami Central, where he will get more exposure now because Miami Central is the powerhouse that it is. But, he was a defensive end that showed up, won the defensive line MVP. He has a couple offers from a couple different schools, so maybe he wasn't as big a surprise as the one we got in Orlando, but I think he was a pleasant surprise as well that could blow up.
Yeah, we generally know who a lot of the kids are, even if they're not 4 or 5 stars. We know who they are, but every once in a while, I had seen Barnes at the Army Combine. I'd seen him play a couple of years ago, I guess in the 2014 season, when he was backing up Ivy as a freshman. But it's always interesting to see when it comes together. I think there was a guy, Demetris Harris, out of Jacksonville, who did really well, was in the mix for the MVP as well. So these camps do give us an opportunity to see a lot of guys and maybe improve the accuracy of our rankings for sure. I think we need to talk about Trevon Grimes, a 5-star wide receiver. He won the MVP at the camp down in South Florida. And really, during the last rankings meeting, I had suggested, whether or not he should be in the discussion for the number 1 overall player. That was sort of poo-pooed at the time, but it seems like he might now have made a pretty good claim.
Yeah, now this is the second straight event against top flight competition that he hasn't just shined at. He's completely dominated it. What did he lose? 1 rep? I saw, Al Blades, who won the defensive back MVP, who I think very highly of, a 2018 defensive back, and went up against Grimes, just kept calling him out because that's the kind of player Al Blades is. And Grimes just kept abusing him. And when you're beating a guy that easily, that's that good, and he beat everybody else he went up against. I think I saw him lose 2 reps out of like the 20 he took.
He
they
lost
just don't
2.
come different.
Who was the player who beat him in those 2 reps? I watched it on the video.
Yeah, he was a guy. He was a South Florida Express kid. I watched it on the video too, but it's escaped my mind.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, with his, Grimes is what, 6'4", 6'5"? I mean, I think personally, I can't believe that he's not even a consensus 5-star, right? Or I guess a unanimous 5-star. He might be consensus, but I don't think so. I think of the 4 major recruiting services, I'll do some research while we kind of talk about it. But how could you see this kid and not be like, this is a top 5 player in the country?
Well, one of them, one of those recruiting services that you mentioned, prides itself on, only giving like 5 stars a year. So that if that's your talking point is we don't give out 5 stars, then I guess that's Grimes gets punished for it or whatever. But go ahead.
You know who else wasn't ranked as a 5-star by anyone? Jalen Ramsey, who's about to be a slam dunk top 5 pick. We were the only ones to have him ranked that high.
Also, Deshaun Watson, who damn near won the national championship.
Right. But Grimes in my mind is a can't miss. Yeah, he doesn't appear to be a 5-star, at least so far on 2 of the 3 other sites I've checked. So I mean, I can't imagine anybody seeing him and not thinking that.
Yeah, he's really something special, and we should touch on the fact that it seems like the 2 front runners to land this guy are Florida and Ohio State. I think that's kind of who it's going to come down to in the end as well.
So he's someone I think we're really going to talk a lot about going forward. I just, it's definitely a man crush situation when it comes to him and his talent. I think, I'm trying to think of a receiver who was that dominant. So in recent times, I guess Ridley would be the last one that I saw dominate events like that.
Yeah, I didn't see as much of Ridley because I wasn't in the region at the time. I was still on the West Coast. But, I saw him at the national events anyway, and the comparison's definitely warranted, I think. I mean, I think that, they're different players, obviously, different types of players, but the way that they just completely dominate other elite-level athletes, that's the way to compare them, I think.
So we go on to, if you want to see any more of our content from the camp, it's on Rivals.com right now on the front page. There's all kinds of stuff everywhere. Rob and I guess, probably wrote about, at each camp, 45 of the 180 prospects. So about that you get basically scouting reports on a third of the camp, pretty much, maybe a little less.
Yeah, not to mention all the recruiting notes, which is all anybody really cares about is where these guys are going, I think.
Right, exactly. So another week for me, another week of Demetris Robertson drama.
Yes. Now we've fulfilled our quota for talking about Demetris Robertson on this podcast.
Yeah, we couldn't go another week without talking about him. He visited Alabama over the weekend. His brother called me, told me, it went really well. And his brother's also his guardian, in case you haven't been following the story. This is the only uncommitted or unsigned 5-star in the class of 2016. And I really just, I don't know what's going to happen. I thought, with the way his brother was talking, I thought it was going to be I had been predicting Alabama all along, and then, the 3 canceled visits sort of shied me away. Now, word comes out yesterday that he's going to visit Georgia in a couple weekends here. So Georgia's going to get the last official visit. He's going to take the SAT again this weekend, but I think he's kind of closed the door on Stanford. I just think the fact that he's not going to take an official visit out there or even leave that window open, that means that he's about to decide. I think he's going to give Georgia a shot, but I guess at this point you have to think it's Alabama, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the logic would dictate. So my question is, how long is this going to go on for? I mean, you're right. I've said this for the last 3 weeks. We've talked about him. He's got no choice but to rule out Stanford because the process of getting accepted to Stanford and the essay writing and the scores and all of that takes too long. I mean, I guess he doesn't have to commit. I mean, he doesn't ever have to sign a letter of intent. But you'd think, as we kind of tick down here it's time to report to camp. He's got to have something set in stone, right? Like, you know him better than I do, obviously, because he's a Georgia guy. I don't cover Georgia. I've interacted with him at 7-on-7s and things of that nature. How long do you think this drags out? If I give you a deadline, let's say that will Demetris Robertson be committed by June 1st?
June 1st, yes. June 1st, I say, would be that would be good. May 1st, I think, maybe a little harder. But his brother said more than once, hey, he could just wake up and decide, and then that's when we're going to announce it. So, I personally think that's probably what's going to happen. I don't know. I mean, there's a push to get him into Georgia. He's friends with a lot of the Georgia players, but I just think those repeated trips to Alabama. He's been to Alabama so many times. The fact that he made that a priority to get over there for another visit. The fact that his brother has told me that he told me before they eliminated Georgia at one point. So I don't.
Part of me just hopes that he's just like at some point just like, screw this, I'm going to become a vending machine repairman.
Well, he says he wants to run track now too, and then of course his sister, who's also a track athlete and he told me was enrolled at Alabama A&M,
but maybe at Alabama.
No, she's now not enrolled anywhere. So she's going to go to the same school he goes to. So we have, we have a little bit of a package deal. We've got a little bit of uncertainty, and it's just what's weird is it hasn't seemed to catch the attention of people. You think a 5-star, uncommitted. The schools are paying attention to it that are involved, but there's not a lot of national intrigue.
It'll be more of a national story when him and his sister call a joint press conference to announce that they've decided to forego college and open an Indian food restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I've almost moved on from the story myself, just because he's going to announce when he's going to announce, and because there's so much misinformation, even directly from the source. You can't really read into anything that happens until it happens. So, I guess I'm going to predict Alabama. I don't know, man. I mean, this one has worn me out. You try to move on from the previous class. We're a month past signing day now. I can't believe this is still going on, really.
I predicted Notre Dame at some point. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I have any idea what's going to happen with this kid anymore. I'm going to stick with Indian food restaurant.
Boy, while we're sitting here, I get a text from a coach about getting his son into the camp this weekend. So.
Yep, there you go. I'm telling you, it's such a great recruiting tool for these coaches. How old is your son? I don't know, 9, but can we still get him in? It's not about the kid getting work in,
I was thinking this particular guy had a son that I felt like lingered in high school for 7 or 8 years before. So I was like, I thought he was graduated. He's like, oh no, this is my younger son. So, yeah. All right, well, let's move on quickly to Rants and Recommendations. We've got a short episode this week. Do you want to start us off? I've got a big time rant that's sort of directed in your direction. So,
yeah, I can start. And I touched on this on Twitter recently, and you can follow me there at Cassidy_Rob. By the way, what I'm real sick of is having to defend my generation for no reason. Like, it seems like there's so many stories out there that's become like about millennial comeuppance porn. Like, watch this millennial get eviscerated for being entitled. I just don't understand what scientific study decided that we were the entitled generation. Like, people are like, your generation gets participation trophies for everything. You know what I never once received in my life? A participation trophy. So I don't know where this idea came from, or who started this idea, or when it became like a widespread thing for people online to cheer as people from my generation get eviscerated, to use a word that's too often in headlines. But you know what else I can't do that my parents did? Drink whiskey at work, like madmen, and have guaranteed Social Security and things like that. So I'm going to start shaming baby boomers. I think I really am. I think I'm going to go hard after my dad. Text him constantly about how his generation lacks work ethic and things of that nature.
Well, boy, first of all, it's the second time you said things of that nature on the podcast, so mark that. We should start a counter on that one. Number 2, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of participation trophies handed out when I was a kid. I do remember my father specifically declining to pay like the $12 or whatever because whatever baseball team I was on was buying participation trophies because my dad said, they didn't win anything. He doesn't deserve a trophy, which I don't think went over too well with the other parents. But, my dad was a tough one.
Okay, but even if there is a participation trophy, how have we let those trophies define the adulthood of our generation? Like, how have we just decided, because you guys got participation trophies, you're all soft? Like those two things do not seem to be correlated to me whatsoever. It just seems like something that old people decided to gripe about and was like, all right.
I watched a long segment on Real Sports about this. I think they dive a little bit into it, maybe a little more, but I tend to lead in.
See, why is there a segment on Real Sports? It's because people like to watch people make fun of millennials. That's why. Like, why is this a story? Why, we're not allowed to generalize groups of people, and you shouldn't do that. But it's okay if it's millennials because they're all right. That's okay.
I do think that personally, I don't know. You're talking to the wrong person because I think if there's one word to describe Woody Womack, grit. Is going to be used heavily in that discussion. So I grew up. In the middle of nowhere doing a lot of weird things that a lot of people don't get to experience. So I don't know. I personally think that, one of the reasons I have success is because some other people are soft and they give up too easily. So I don't necessarily generalize millennials, but
yeah, I was going to say, is that a millennial thing? Because I have an uncle that's really, really soft. He's not a millennial.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Well, I everyone I went to high school with is still living in my hometown. So
well, anyway, get on the internet and watch people be mean to millennials if that's how you get your kicks.
All right, so we know If anyone's still listening after after that discussion, I have something to complain about, and it involves you, Rob. So we had the camp in Miami this weekend, and I guess it was at Gulliver Prep, which is a nice facility, and there's a lot of good restaurants around that area. You live nearby, and we get sandwiches from, what was the name of the place?
Roasters and Toasters, which is technically a pretty famous Miami sandwich place.
Yeah. Well, guess what? If you give me a sandwich and it doesn't have cheese on it, it's not a sandwich, okay? Whatever happened to cheese? Cheese is an integral part of a sandwich. It should be, here's the priority order of a sandwich: bread, meat, and then cheese. If you don't have, after that, you can add whatever you want. But we got 3 trays of sandwiches. Now, one of them had a slice of cheese on it. They all had lettuce and tomato. And they were all on white bread, which is also disgusting.
In defense of Roasters and Toasters, it is a Jewish deli that's busiest time is Sunday afternoon, which also happened to be the Sunday of the camp. It specializes in giant, pastrami sandwiches and hot sandwiches. We got it catered for 60 people, so we had no choice. I think Sarah did this, our wonderful producer, ordered the catering tray, which is probably just the easiest thing to make that they can get in and out for 60 people, because they can't take time to the brunch rush to make the real Roasters and Toasters hot pastramis or whatever it is that they sell there. You've been to the Jewish delis, though. It specializes in things like that, matzo ball soup, things of that nature, not giant trays. So maybe that's on me because I suggested it. But no, I was a little bit disappointed with the quality as compared to the usual Roasters and Toasters menu if you just go in there on a regular day.
It's not just that. It's, I believe it's not. Jimmy John's is an issue. I don't think cheese. I think cheese is 25 cents extra or 50 cents extra. Cheese should not be extra on a sandwich. I'm trying to think of the other place. Jersey Mike's. Jersey Mike's cheese is extra there too. Why would cheese ever be extra on a sandwich? It just doesn't make any sense.
No, I agree. It's it's part of the entitled millennials generation. They can pay for everything. We need to make sandwiches great again, Woody.
Right. Listen, And that rolls right into my recommendation, Rob, actually. I think we all know that I'm a big fan of good cheese, and I would recommend Tillamook cheese from Tillamook, Oregon, available at Publix. They hide it. They keep it in the deli cheese section, not the one you have to get over the counter, but where they have the soft cheeses, the fetas, and those type of things. That's where cheeses, the Tillamook is.
Your blue cheeses.
We're talking no preservatives. You look at the ingredients on this thing. You're talking, milk, salt, and enzymes, and that's it. So, if you want a real cheese that doesn't use cow innards as part of the recipe, which most cheeses do, by the way, check the label next time you're eating cheddar and see if you're eating cow intestines as part of it. I would go with Tillamook cheese. You can find it on their website. Anyone's got any questions, contact me directly at Rivals Woody. I will answer all cheese-related inquiries on behalf of the company.
You've become a great crusader for cheese rights in 2016.
Guess what? It's better than Cabot. It's better than any other type of cheese you'll find. But guess what? It's been exiled. If they put it on the cheese aisle, it would fly off the shelves. You can also find it at Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Kroger, and not Winn-Dixie, but Winn-Dixie, you shouldn't go there anyway. So
this country will not wage a war on cheese on Woody Womack's watch.
Nah, sorry. You got anything for us to recommend?
No, I keep trying to read the Mindy Kaling book. I'm saving it for this weekend, where we'll have a flight to New Orleans for the Rivals Camp Series stop in NOLA. I will start it there. It's her second book. I enjoyed the first book very much, so the second one should be just as good. Hopefully I'll be able to review that on a future episode of the podcast.
All right, that wraps it up for us. Remember to give us a review on iTunes, follow us on Twitter, send us any email you might have, rivalspodcast@yahoo.com. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Hopefully we can find some time to record in person this weekend when we're down in New Orleans.
Yeah, maybe a live show from Bourbon Street. Cheese for everyone.